Hi, my name is Jordan Clark, and this is my Art Journaling 101 workshop. In today's video, I'm sharing a really fun collage technique to make these beautiful landscape postcards. Just like with my last video, you can use these techniques and do them directly in your art journal, but for this video, I am making the collage on these blank postcards by Strathmore. These are so fun to use because when you're done, you can mail them to your family and friends. And the star of the show in today's video are these watercolor pencils, which we're going to use to create the beautiful colors and textures that you see in this collage. Now don't be intimidated if you've never used these before. Today's project is super simple and will be the perfect introduction for you to start getting familiar with the pencils. Now the way that these differ from regular colored pencils is that after you draw with them on your paper, you can apply water, and this transforms the pencil marks into a beautiful wash of color that kind of resembles paint. So in this video, I'm going to start by showing you exactly how to use these watercolor pencils by making some swatches and mixing the colors so that we can create our palette. Then I'll show you a really fun and easy way to use this to make our collage landscape. I love making collages in my art journal because I feel like this really helps me to loosen up and just play with my materials instead of being so caught up in making a perfect piece of art. The magic of collage is that you really don't know what it's going to look like in the end. The artwork kind of comes together on its own right in front of your eyes as you experiment with your paper and different materials. And today we're going to be making a really simple collage just using drawing paper and the watercolor pencils, but I encourage you to try this out and explore collage further on your own if you feel inspired to. Try out different types of paper or recycled materials or magazine cutouts or really anything that you can get your hands on. Play with color and composition. You can make abstract designs or base your collage on a more realistic scene like we're doing in today's video and see what you can come up with. So let's get started with today's video. I'm going to jump into all of the supplies that you'll need. You'll need a set of these mixed media postcards by Strathmore. They come in this little paper pad for you to tear out, and on the back of each one there's a space to write a note, and there's also a space for an address if you decide to mail it. You'll need the set of Rembrandt Aquarell pencils by Lyra, and this set comes with 12 colors in a metal tin, handy for storage or for travel. You'll need a round number 3 paintbrush. I'm using the Velvetouch brush by Princeton. A cup of water, some drawing paper. I have some cut up pieces from a Strathmore drawing pad. And not pictured, but you'll also need a glue stick and some scissors. Let's get started. We're going to begin by making some swatches of the different colors that we'll need for this landscape collage. I have a piece of drawing paper here, but feel free to do the swatches in your art journal as well. The colors that we make here will be the palette for our collage. So first, I want to make a light green color, and I'm going to do this by laying down a layer of lemon yellow with my pencil, and then I'm going to lightly go over that with my black pencil. Then grab your paintbrush, dip it in water, and brush it over the pencil to start mixing the colors. You'll see that as you go over the pencil marks, it turns into a watercolor type consistency. So this color turned out to be a bit lighter and more yellowy because I didn't add as much black. So I'm going to try mixing these pencils again, but add more black this time to see if I can get a deeper green. Just by pressing down a little bit harder with the black, I can add more pigment and make this nice earthy green shade. And make sure to label each swatch with the colors that you use so it's easy to reference in the future when you want to mix your colors. Next, I'm going to make more of a blue-green color, and for this I'll add layers of sap green, Prussian blue, and a little bit of black to darken this. Once again, grab your paintbrush, dip it in water, and then brush over the pencil to mix the colors. I really love watching the color transform once you add the water. It's just so fun to see what it turns out to be. Next, I'm making a nice deep blue by adding layers of Prussian blue, a little bit of Venetian red, and black. Now I'm making a black, but I'm adding some Prussian blue so that it's a little bit more interesting. I like mixing other colors into my black because I feel like that slight variation in color gives it more depth than just a flat black. Now I'm going to make a dark pinky orange color that will be perfect for a sunset sky, and to do this I'll add layers of Venetian red and then a layer of Van Dyke brown so that the red isn't so bright, and then white. And I'm pressing harder with the white than I did with the other colors so I can get a nice layer on top that will soften this color. And then I'll add the water and you'll see this beautiful color that it transforms into. Now I want to make a gray color that will also be good for the sky or maybe clouds, but we're not going to use black like you might think. I'm starting with a layer of Venetian red and then Prussian blue and then some Van Dyke brown, and finally a heavier layer of white. Then when we add the water, you'll see how these colors combine to create a really interesting gray that has little pockets of color peeking out, which I think will be a really nice addition to our sky. Next, I want to make one more sky color. This one will be a light pink. So I'm going to start with a layer of Venetian red, and then I'm going over that with a thin layer of light blue, and then a layer of white. And these colors combine to create a really nice pale pink. And finally, the last color I want to make for our landscape palette is a sunny golden yellow. So I'm going to start with a base of yellow, and then I'm going over that with Venetian red, and then a light layer of brown to deepen that color. And when we add water, this will make a really nice, rich yellow. So this is our landscape color palette. Now let's move on to the next step. You'll need some drawing paper. I cut mine into strips a little bit wider than the postcard, but it doesn't really matter what size this is because we're going to use this paper to make big swatches of our color palette that will then be ripped up and used in the collage. I'm going to go through each of the colors that we just mixed and make big rectangles of each one, starting with our earthy green color here. So the same way that we made those small color swatches, I'm going to do that here by layering the pencils and then using my paintbrush to add water. And as you paint over the colors for these larger swatches, you'll notice that you can add more water to really blend the colors, or if you add a bit less water, the brush strokes will be more noticeable. And when this dries, it creates a really nice texture. So I like playing around with this because it will add more interesting details to the final collage. I also think it's a really nice effect when the colors don't fully mix together and you can kind of still see the different pigments from the pencils. So I would encourage you to not overwork the color too much with your paintbrush and allow the brush strokes and the variation in color to show through. Now, there are a couple reasons why I'm using drawing paper here instead of something thicker like watercolor paper. The drawing paper is pretty thin, which is ideal for collage, where we're going to be layering lots of pieces on top of each other. While these watercolor pencils would look beautiful on a nice watercolor paper, if we used that for the collage, it would be difficult to rip it into pieces, and it would also make it harder to glue it all together. Another reason why I like the drawing paper for this project is that the water does make it buckle and bend a bit because it's so thin. But once again, I think this adds more interesting texture to the collage, so I just embrace it. When you're finished with your color swatches, let them dry completely. And now we have this beautiful palette to work with to create our collage landscape. I'm going to cut these rectangles apart because we're going to start tearing pieces of all these different colors to make our design, so it'll just be easier to work with if they're separated. Grab one of your blank postcards and we're going to start arranging our paper pieces on top without glue just so we can figure out the design. And I don't do too much planning with collages. I really like to just jump in and see how everything comes together as I go. So when you're tearing the paper, if you pull it towards you, it will tear with a clean edge like you see here. But if I pull that paper that's in my left hand towards the back, it will leave a white edge. And you can play around with this effect depending on what shape you're trying to make. Sometimes I like leaving in the white edge because it looks interesting when it's layered on top of another piece of paper. So this first shape that I'm making is supposed to kind of look like grassy hills, which I'm going to place at the bottom of my postcard. Then I'm taking my other green color to tear some more similar shapes that I'm going to layer behind that first one and start building up the foreground. Again, as I'm tearing, I'm alternating the direction to either keep the edge clean or let the white edge show through. And this is all trial and error. It's part of the fun of collage. You really work with the materials as you go, and the artwork will slowly begin to reveal itself. If you tear a shape that you don't like, all you have to do is tear a new one. And don't get too caught up in making a perfect representation of a landscape. Part of the beauty of collage is its abstract nature and how you don't necessarily know exactly what you're looking at. As you see here, I realized as I was layering that I wanted more of the white edge showing through to show those different layers, so I'm just going back in to tear away a bit more paper. Next, I'm going to take my black color swatch and use this to make some mountain shapes. The white edge looks especially nice on the mountains because it almost makes them look snow-capped, so I made sure to leave that in when I was tearing the paper. Now that I have the basic foreground, I wanted something to add a little bit more detail here, so I decided to take my darker green color and use this to make some trees. So I'm tearing some loose cone shapes in a few different sizes to represent the trees. You really don't need to make this a perfect tree shape. It'll still look like a tree based on where we place it on the landscape. So I'm tucking these shapes in between some of my grass layers, and it looks like a little forest. Next, I'm going to take my yellow paper to make a half circle shape that will represent the sun. I'm planning on this being a sunset landscape scene, so I want to make the sun look like it's dipping behind the mountains. And from there, I'll layer more colors to build up the sky and make a kind of abstracted gradient. So I'm going to start with my light pink to make a thin strip that will go at the bottom of the horizon, kind of around the sun and the tops of the mountains. Then I'm taking the darker pink to fill in more of the sky, and I'll tear the edge of that so that it layers nicely, and I'm going to tuck that behind all my other layers. And then at the very top, I'm going to add some blue. And then the last thing that I feel like this needs is a few clouds. This will help bring the gradient together and make it look more like a sky. So I'm taking the light pink again to tear a thin strip that is going to layer on top of the sky. And then I'm also taking that gray color that we made and tearing another thin shape for a cloud. And I think these shapes really help to balance out the composition. So finally, now that I have a layout that I'm happy with, it's time to glue everything together. I'm starting at the very bottom and gluing the layers to each other first before I actually glue them onto the postcard. I try to work starting with the layers that are more on top of the composition and then assembling the rest of the layers that go behind those. This particular collage is a pretty simple layout, which makes it easier to glue all the pieces together, but take your time if you have something more elaborate. And I'm using a glue stick here because this gives me a little more time to move things around before it all dries, which is helpful when assembling the collage. Also, liquid glue tends to warp the paper, and sometimes you can even see the glue through really thin pieces, so I like to just stick with the glue stick. If you find that your glue has slightly warped your paper or things just aren't laying flat, you can always press this under a heavy book to flatten it after you're finished putting it all together. Once all the collage pieces are glued together, then I'm just going to attach this to the blank side of the postcard. Press this nice and flat and make sure everything is adhered together, and then you can use scissors to trim off the paper that's hanging off the edge. And when you're finished, you have this beautiful collage postcard. You can keep it as art or write a little note on the back and send it off to a friend. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for following along with this art tutorial. I really hope that you had fun making this collage landscape postcard. And feel free to change up the design of this collage. You could take inspiration from the nature that is around you, or even the changing seasons or the time of day. You can take these different elements to alter the design of the collage. And when you're done, you have this little piece of art that you can mail to someone. That's it for this video, but I hope that you'll join me for the next video in this Art Journaling 101 workshop. I'll see you there.